The forest didn't stir. Even the birds seemed to fall silent as the bear collapsed, exhaling a final, steaming breath that rolled across the undergrowth like mist. Beneath her, buried in pine needles and gore, Hugh Glass lay motionless. His rifle was long gone, his knife slick with blood and snapped halfway down the blade. The air was thick with the iron stench of death, but it wasn't his, not yet. Pain ebbed through his body like the pull of the Missouri. One of his legs was twisted beneath him, the femur cracked or worse. His back was flayed open in a dozen places, the skin peeled back in thick ribbons. A gash across his scalp leaked into his good eye. The other had already swollen shut. Breathing came in gurgling fits. Something inside his chest had caved inward. Every time he inhaled, the world tipped sideways. He didn't cry out. He couldn't. The bear had crushed half his throat. His voice had left him the moment she struck. The silence was deeper than death. Around him, the trees loomed high and uncaring. He was no longer a man, just meat cooling in the shadow of the pines. The only sound was the soft bubbling of blood at the edge of his mouth. He was alone, and he knew with terrible clarity that no one was coming. Summer of 1823. The Rocky Mountain Fur Company was weeks into its journey up the Missouri River, carving its way through Arikara territory. After the massacre at Grand River, where a dozen trappers had been scalped and butchered, the survivors moved like ghosts, each man gripping his rifle as if it were the only thread holding him to life. Captain Andrew Henry had split the company to avoid detection. Glass was part of the advance party, scouting ahead, mapping terrain, and watching for signs of danger. He had always worked alone. He preferred it. No distractions, just the sounds of the wilderness and the movements of prey and predator alike. The day he was attacked, the air was thick and damp. Glass had noticed bear sign not far from a berry thicket. Fresh scat, claw marks on the bark of a cedar, tufts of fur snagged on a root. He slowed, scanning the tree line. He didn't see the cubs until they broke through the brush. Too close. Too late. The mother exploded from the trees with terrifying speed. Glass fired once, the round hitting her in the chest, but she didn't falter. She barreled into him with all the weight of a charging bull. The force snapped his leg and threw him backward. Her claws raked his back, flaying him to the spine. He stabbed her blindly as she bit into his shoulder, the pain erupting in a blinding white wash. He fought until she died on top of him. Then everything went still. When the rest of the company found him, he was unrecognizable. His flesh had been torn to ribbons. His scalp was nearly detached. One arm hung limp, barely attached by sinew. Blood soaked the forest floor. And yet somehow he was alive. Barely. They carried him on a stretcher fashioned from saplings and buffalo hide. For 2 days, they hauled his broken body through thickets and over ridgelines, but the pace slowed dangerously. Scouts reported fresh Arikara tracks nearby. They were in hostile country. Every hour spent hauling Glass brought the company closer to ambush. Henry made the call. He offered extra pay to any 2 men willing to stay behind, care for Glass until he passed, and then bury him. John Fitzgerald volunteered. Hard-eyed and pragmatic, he wasn't the type to waste sympathy on a dying man. Jim Bridger joined him, just 17, frightened, but loyal to a fault. They promised to watch over Glass, to do right by him. They lasted 3 days. Glass didn't die, but they told themselves he would. They took his rifle, his knife, his gear, and left. Told the others he had passed in his sleep, that they'd buried him deep and marked the grave with stones. They didn't bury him. They didn't even cover him. They just left. Glass awoke to flies. They swarmed his open wounds. Maggots already wriggled across the ragged flesh on his back. His throat felt packed with dust. His limbs were heavy and cold, but his mind was clear. He had been left, abandoned, robbed, and somehow alive. He couldn't stand, could barely crawl, but his rage was strong enough to push him forward. One elbow at a time he began to move. He had no map, no weapon. Just the direction of the Cheyenne River burned into his mind. He would find water. Then he would find the men who had left him to die. The journey was slow and brutal. Every movement tore at his wounds. He had to stop often to pass out or vomit. His leg he splinted using willow branches and strips of hide peeled from the bear carcass. He ate roots, insects, the occasional lizard. Once, he scared a pack of wolves off a bison calf's corpse by waving a burning stick, then crawled into the ribcage and devoured what he could. To avoid infection, he let maggots eat the necrotic tissue from his back. At night, he tucked himself beneath fallen trees or thick underbrush, shaking from fever and praying not to be found by animals or men. The Arikara were still out there, and he couldn't run. He moved for weeks, 200 miles on his belly. By the time he reached the Cheyenne River, his body had withered to bone and sinew. He could no longer feel his foot. His hands were raw, but he had made it. A band of Lakota found him half dead along the waterline. They didn't kill him. One man treated his wounds with poultices of willow bark and bear fat. Another fed him broth and tucked buffalo hides around his frail frame. They gave him a raft and sent him downriver. He floated for days, drifting in and out of fever dreams. He dreamed of claws, fire, water, betrayal. He saw Fitzgerald's face again and again, not with hatred, just with certainty, like gravity. He washed ashore near Fort Kiowa. The men who pulled him from the water thought he was a ghost. He had no beard left, no hair. His face was a mask of scars. When he finally spoke, they leaned in close to hear the rasp of a single name. Fitzgerald. He found Bridger first. The boy froze when he saw him. His eyes welled with tears. I thought you were dead," he whispered. Glass didn't speak for a long time. When he did, his voice was quiet. "You left me. I didn't want to. He made me. I was scared." Glass looked at him, really looked, and he saw what was there: regret, shame, guilt. He let him live. Fitzgerald had joined the army. Glass tracked him to Fort Atkinson. He stood outside the gates for hours, waiting. Soldiers gathered, whispers spread. When Fitzgerald finally appeared, he stopped dead. Their eyes locked. Glass didn't draw a weapon. "I'm not here to kill you," he said. "You're a soldier now. That's your shield." Fitzgerald sneered. "Then why come?" Glass stepped forward. "I came for my rifle." The one Fitzgerald had taken, the one Glass had earned. Fitzgerald handed it over. Glass turned and walked away. He returned to the mountains, to the rivers and frozen earth, to the snowfields and canyons where a man could disappear. He trapped, hunted, moved silently through valleys few white men had ever seen. His scars never fully healed, his leg always dragged. But he worked. He breathed. He lived for another decade, until the Arikara found him again in 1833. This time, there was no raft, no crawl, no reprieve, but Hugh Glass had already beaten death. He had fought it in the dirt beneath a bear's corpse, had crawled through wilderness with his spine torn open and his heart burning with a fire no storm could extinguish. He had been robbed, abandoned, forgotten, and still found his way back. His story outlived him. It passed from mouth to mouth, from riverboat to fur camp. They told it in French, in Lakota, in broken English and journal entries. He became myth, the man who wouldn't die, the ghost who crawled through hell. Some say it was revenge that drove him. Others say it was stubbornness. But maybe it was just something simpler. Maybe Hugh Glass lived because he refused not to. Thank you for listening to Deserted Trails. Subscribe for more forgotten stories from the old frontier.